Dr Kay Saville-Smith, who's going to come and join me on the stage right now. I am told she is a taonga of CHAR. She's a taonga of the Building Better Cities and Towns, and she comes to us with a New Year's honour awarded to her last year. Ladies and gentlemen, show some love, Dr Kay Saville-Smith. Let's rip into it, shall we, Kay? Oh, sorry, and I just wanted to remind you, as Kay's speaking, please feel free to post your questions on the app so they're ready to go at the end of her presentation. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I actually want to just start at this moment just with an acknowledgement of the passing of Tex Clark, a trustee of Aotearoa. That was the group that joined us yesterday, passed overnight, so our condolences. I'm sure Yvonne is somewhere and Rangi Mahora is somewhere else here today, but I just wanted to acknowledge that. He's been a great leader in terms of not only kaumātua services and the fact that older people in New Zealand can do it for themselves with support, and they provide vibrancy. He's a model of that, but also has been supporting housing and housing across generations solutions. So I just wanted to acknowledge him. I'm not going to speak at great length, so you can look at the screen, but there's probably not going to be coming up much on there because I'm aware that we have Andrew Crisp here, and I don't want him to be let off the hook. So, as the new CEO of HUD, and he has very many important things to say about where housing is going in New Zealand. But I want to make just a few comments, which is really based on 30-odd years of doing housing research and being around the housing sector for a while. I'm actually only, 32. It's ground me down now. And I think the first comment that I want to make is that housing need, the housing crisis, is not a wicked problem. It is not what is classically known as a wicked problem. In fact, we have one of the experts on wicked problems in complex ecological systems, Fiona Cram, one of my colleagues, is sitting there and now I think has spilt water on her, on her notes. But it is not a wicked problem. We are starting to call it that because there are lots of problems and it is a complex environment in which we work. But we know that we can get housing solutions, and indeed, for many, many generations, there were housing solutions. There were always particular problems, usually come out of, and you've heard around the mechanisms in which those problems have occurred: dispossession of land, restrictions on people being able to build on their on their own land and their whenua. You've heard all of those problems, but actually, for many, many generations, New Zealand was able to provide reasonable housing for the vast majority of people. Now, that's not the characteristic of a wicked solution. A wicked solution is a solution that has no solution. I mean, a wicked problem has no solution. You have gooder and better things, but you don't have a solution. And in housing, it's a really interesting thing because housing solutions are really about creating, maintaining, sustaining, supporting homes. And the solution, one of the points about wicked problems when people talk about them, is they say, well, the solution's not clear. Well, they are, aren't they? You know, the bad thing, the wrong solution is stripping people of their financial capabilities, their cultural capabilities. It's about putting them into unhealthy situations, insecure, unsafe, crowded homes, being unprotected, making people dependent. That's the wrong solution. That's clear. The right solution is good homes. Not that hard, is it? So we do actually know what the right solution is. What we struggle is how to get there now after we've had 30 years. We often think about the housing crisis as something that's happened over the last 9 years, 10 years, maybe 12 years. It's not. It had its genesis at least 30 years ago. And if you look at all the statistics, which I'm not going to throw at you, but you can get on the site, when you look at the statistics, that critical period was 1991. That was when the housing reforms, the so-called reforms, came into drive policy, and it essentially turned housing assistance and the development of people having decent homes from an issue of investment to an issue of welfarism, which treated people as pathological beings who failed because they weren't properly homed. So we've had 9 years of crisis denial. We all knew there was a crisis, but it was denied. We had a period again where people are labelled as failures because they're in poor homes, and we've had lots of easy fixes. And it is a scandal, isn't it, that something sat on the UNESCO register for 12 years or 13 years or so, and then has been overwhelmed by one of the so-called easy fixes, which was the special housing areas, which I have to say has failed. And why has it failed? Because unlike some, and I hear this a lot, Kay, we just need to build a shitload, and that's the word that has been used, shitload of houses, and it will all be all right. Well, it won't be, and we know it's not all right, because actually the houses that are built are at the high value end, they're where big margins can be made, they're not at the affordable housing end, they're not at the area that allows low-income families to survive, they're not in the place which allows middle-income and key workers to actually develop housing solutions for themselves. And the one thing that I have to say, and people here will know, they say, oh God, here goes again, is that in general, economic value does not trickle down. It tends to get concentrated at the top. Almost all universally, housing misery does trickle down. So if those people in the middle market, used to be in the middle market, who could buy modest homes and make their way with them with some support, cannot do that anymore, they move down the market. And who do they move down the market for? They move and exclude those that are most vulnerable, those that need the most assistance, and those that actually are struggling to make their way. So housing misery trickles down. Unfortunately, wealth doesn't always trickle down, and so we need to have a housing system. And I hear a lot about people saying the housing system is terribly, terribly complex. Actually, we have a very simple housing system in New Zealand. It's called the market. And it's regulated by a couple of things. A building act which in general doesn't work and actually creates, in some cases, more problems than it resolves. And we have an accommodation supplement which is designed not to fill the unaffordable gap for people. It's embedded in policy not to do that. And an income-related rent system. And around that, we have trickles of money occasionally, which are given to groups, often very well-meaning, and extremely expert, actually, not just well-meaning, but extremely expert, in the hope that those groups will be able to deal with the mess that's been left by the market, the accommodation supplement, and this welfare type investment rather than a housing home investment. And so actually our housing system is very, very simple. What we have, of course, is very complex transactions in the housing market. The building industry, housing providers, developers, etc., etc. This has been, certainly for the last 10 years, the period, the age of the deal. We bet Trump to this. It's all been about, Can you come up with an idea that won't cost me a lot but will save me a bit of money? And so the community housing sector has been particularly vulnerable to that because, of course, you all deal with the most vulnerable. And because of that, if a deal is presented, you tend to take it because you think, well, if I don't take it, what else is going to happen? That's very different from before 1990, where there was a huge array of toolkits or tools in the toolkit, including sustained investment in the community housing sector and investment in the household sector through, many of you would know, Māori Affairs loans, there were state advances loans, anyone got capitalisation of family benefit, remember those days? Those, it was for ordinary households that actually got a lot of investment from government, irrespective of party, for a long time. That was broken. And after that was broken, we see inequality opening up. We see issues of rural housing worsening, particularly for Māori. 1988, there was an important piece of work which said, what we need to do is support and capital invest in Māori housing in rural areas so those communities can make their decisions about their futures and have a safe platform on which to do it. Well, that lasted 2 years as an idea, didn't it? And then went out the window. But that is where we have now a completely impoverished toolkit. And so actually at the moment, while housing need, getting homes, delivering the infrastructure that we need is not a wicked problem. Actually, any problem is a wicked problem when you don't have the toolkit.